Ladies and gentlemen, no one growing up says, I want to be an addict. Let's face it. We all grew up, none of us, that was not on our wish list. We all wanted the happily ever after story, right? That's what we all wanted. Then life happens and decisions get made, and situations change, and choices that we think we can control, well, they start controlling us. Hope is replaced by misery. Misery loves company, and misery continues to push us deeper and deeper into despair. Many people never recover. For those that do recover, the journey is very long and it's filled with perils that never end. They never end. So today we're going to meet somebody who's faced the demon. Her story is raw, it's powerful, and it's not for the faint of heart. But you need to hear this. So my guest is Andee Scarantino. And Andee is an author as well as a mindset and transformational coach specializing in identity work. And this is heavy stuff, identity work. She holds a master's degree in sociology from Columbia. Her work incorporates how macro-level systems contribute to individual arrested development. Now, most of you probably don't even understand what that is, but it's heavy-duty stuff. Now, she's a contributing author to a brand new book. Brand new book is called The Fourfold Formula for Nurse or Copy for All Things Wellness, and this is by our friends Peggy Whelm and Dr. Marcus Wittman. And it just came out. Go get the book. Okay, Andee, welcome to Energy Healing and Integrative Wellness.
Thank you, Frank. I'm so glad to be here. This is awesome.
This is exciting because I read your story and I went, wow, people have to hear. You have to read this. Number one, ladies and gentlemen, go buy this book and read this chapter because it's incredibly inspiring. So, Andee, give us a short overview of your early life, and particularly you have a story about a Thanksgiving in 2015. So touch on that.
Yeah. All right. So I do want to preface, and by the way, thank you so much for having me on the show. It's a really, really awesome opportunity for me. I do want to preface by saying that this story is somewhat told in a linear way. And while I am going to mention other people that are involved, there are no villains in my story other than my unhealed self. So there are going to be people that are mentioned. Thanksgiving 2015 was just one of those snapshots of kind of an idea of what my life looked like at that period of time. Now that's going back now 7 years. The people that are involved in that story are much, much different. That's a dated kind of snapshot of what my life and the people involved are like. So my early life, my very early life actually was filled with great memories. And then I don't have any big T trauma, but I do have small T traumas in my life. You know, when my brothers were born, my parents, my father kind of made some ill business decisions, and my parents ended up kind of getting a divorce and losing their businesses and losing their home. And my mom really had to work to go back to school. She was working 3 jobs, and she worked really hard to kind of overhaul, our family and get us back on track. She did a phenomenal job. She's a phenomenal woman. But I have a brother with a disability. There were some behavioral issues there. There were some. My father had mental illness, undiagnosed mental illness, some diagnosed mental illness. But so I had some small T traumas. But all in all, like, I didn't have. Early life for me was suburban American, typical for the 1990s, and it wasn't like anything that was overly bad or overly good, but I developed, because of some of the events that I just mentioned, some ego programs, which those of you in personal development will know what that means. For those of you that don't, I just developed early beliefs about myself, who I was, what I was capable of doing. And those beliefs, because they were formed at such a young age, kind of started dictating how I lived and the decisions that I made, and really how I felt about myself. And I felt always, especially when I got to college and undergrad, that I was running from things. I was always running from something. I was running from my family. I was running from lower middle class American suburbia. I went to a high school. I graduated with 64 people. We didn't even have AP courses. Like I was always running from something, and I started drinking as sort of a way to cope, and also as a way to kind of establish myself as, drinking, smoking cigarettes. It was all identity, right? Like it was all kind of came from larger industries, which I wasn't aware of at the time, big alcohol, big tobacco. But it was part of this identity that I created for myself, that life was hard and I was going to do these things and it was going to make me tough and I was going to be tough and I was going to run away from all of this. And I didn't realize that I had beliefs about myself that weren't, that painted me not in a positive light. And, just the example that I gave about Thanksgiving of 2015, that was sort of just imagery. It was imagery of, being with family, there being arguments that I don't remember inviting. I remember just kind of sitting in the cold outside of their house, just drinking wine, alone on my phone because someone had picked a fight with me, screaming, yelling. There was always screaming and yelling at holidays. Other imagery that I use in the beginning of the story, just kind of every day, the train coming into the station and being like, is today the day? Is today the day?
Right.
Working at a restaurant, always kind of, not that there's anything necessarily inherently wrong with hospitality work, but at the, I don't know, as an hourly, like it's a very rote, repetitive, physically demanding job. I didn't have a lot of positive coping mechanisms for stress and anxiety, drank all the time. I ate very poorly. I never exercised, had a 2 to 3 liter a day diet soda habit. Like I was not in a good spot. And like, just thinking about Thanksgiving 2015, that was kind of really when my life started where I started to stop being present in my life. Like I was just noticing that everything around me was just shitty all the time. Like things were just shitty. People were always yelling. There was always chaos. And I didn't realize at the time that I was very responsible for the creation of a lot of that.
Wow. I think that's something a lot of us can relate to at some point, particularly the holiday events, which I don't know how many movies have been made about the holidays where the families get together and there's just massive clashing that goes on. It's crazy. It's crazy. One of the things you had in your book that I absolutely loved is when we go through something like this, we always hit what we think is the bottom. And you put in the book is the lowest point in your life was sitting alone on an airport bench. What happened?
Yes. What happened? Well, so this was really an integral moment in what I like to call the moment where I woke up. And what ended up happening was, I told you about 2015. And in 2016, I got into a long distance relationship with my now ex-boyfriend. And he's a very good man. But that particular evening, I had been visiting him. And we were all sitting around. He invited some friends over to the house and we were drinking pretty heavily. And I talk about this from the standpoint that I don't have very clear memories of this. I remember that after everybody left, I was very upset in what I believed to be, I believed I was vindicated in this. I believe I was upset because he was very concerned that his ex-wife was going to find out that I was visiting him. And I felt that this was ridiculous. Like I am, yeah, like I'm, the person that you're with, and this shouldn't be the case. And I remember a screaming match. I remember him saying, get out of my house. He remembers things very differently. He remembers me being belligerent, threatening, all of these things. And he was very clearly didn't want me in his home. And so he, after a lot of arguing and screaming and yelling, and it was a lot of emotion and anger and drunkenness. He dropped me off at the airport and just left me there, turned off his phone, went home, went to bed. And, it was it was January, and it was cold. And I was, I didn't have a flight to get back to New York. And, I wasn't going to I was drunk, I wasn't gonna, I didn't, what are you gonna do? So I went on, I went on my phone, I went on skip lag. I got a last minute flight that didn't leave till 8 a.m. So here I am, it's 2 a.m. And I'm smiling, but I'm smiling because you don't like to always revisit the emotion of feeling
Exactly.
so like discarded, like, so I do have, at that time, I was still working nights in the restaurant. A lot of my friends had that same job. So I did have some friends that talked on the phone with me for a couple of hours, until I was able to secure a flight. You buy a flight, you don't have confirmation to enter the airport for several hours, because and once I got
Security.
yeah. And it was a smaller airport. So, TSA hadn't even arrived yet. That was, so it's just me in the pre-TSA part of the airport, kind of just sitting there. There were a couple of people kind of sleeping by the restroom. Nothing was open, things like that. And I was very drunk. Like, I was very drunk, and I was crying, and I was angry, and I was just, and I had never felt so awful, like, in my entire life. I looked worse than I'd ever looked. I was really heavy. And had a lot of I looked old. Like, and not that there's anything wrong with looking old, but I don't remember 2018. How old am I now? I'm going to be 37, so it's 4 years ago. 33. I looked probably 45. I looked terrible. Like, I looked like and I was like, how the fuck did I get here? So when I finally got I was able to secure the flight and be able to just kind of like, all right, just be able to, say, okay, I'm going to be getting out of here. About 6 o'clock in the morning, when restaurants opened and, the airport finally opened, I went into the the restaurant, and there are like two moments that I really remember from that night. And the first was going into this restaurant, and the first thing I did was order a beer. And because of course, what are you gonna do? And it had been a Saturday night, but it was now Sunday, and they were like, no alcohol until 10 a.m. And I'm like, okay, this is good. This is probably a good thing. So I asked for a Diet Coke. I was still, having my soda habit. And they forgot it. And, I did the work, like, I get it, but it was such a, like, Jesus Christ, like, is one more person going to, like, forget about me here? Like, I had reached out to a friend of his, I'd sent him like a message on Snapchat. I was like, and I kind of framed it like, oh, my ex isn't answering his phone. I hope he's okay. We had a disagreement. And like, I was sort of, I don't remember if I had explained what happened, but I was sort of hoping that friend would be like, are you okay? But no one asked me that. No one was ever asked me if I was okay. And they forgot this Diet Coke, and I was like, Jesus, like, could you just not forget my soda? Like, can you just not forget? And just feeling bad for myself. And then the next memory that I have that was really poignant, the moment that I say that I woke up, was when I was sitting at the gate, and we were about ready to board, and I must have looked like shit. I'd been drinking, crying all night, sitting at this gate, and there was a woman across from me, and she just looked at me, and she said, "Are you okay?"
There it was.
There it was. And I snapped at her, like, cruelly, like, nasty, like, yeah, I'm fine. Like, and I was like, oh my God. Like, and it was just enough to clear the mirror. Those of us who work in personal development, we talk about, a coach being able to hold a mirror, like, to clear the mirror. And a lot of people can't see what's happening. Like, they can't see when they're in the throes of addiction, when they're in there, like, when your neural pathways are wired so tight that you just can't see yourself. And in that moment that I just needed someone to ask me about, and then when they did, I was like, yeah, I'm fine. Like, and I'm like, I am most certainly not fine.
That's right.
And it was just that. And I say that my recovery, and I talk about the difference between sobriety and recovery in my story, is that my recovery started in that moment. I didn't stop drinking for 2 years, but my recovery started right then, in that moment.
I love this statement. You open up this chapter in her book, which is called "I Began Alone on an Airport Bench," and she opens it up and says, "Recovery is about moving toward yourself without the shitty job, the shitty partner, and all the misaligned experiences." Expand on that.
You know, putting it so simply, what happens when your computer crashes? You recover it, right? Like your phone dies and you recover it from a backup. Like recovery and sobriety are not the same thing. My partner Martin John Garcia calls sobriety a beverage choice, and I wholeheartedly believe that that's what it is. Recovery is about getting yourself back, and I think all of us, like especially when we find ourselves so wound up in programs that we've created, neurological shortcuts and things that don't always serve us, we're always trying to get back to like who we were when we were 6 or 7 years old. And that light that we had at that time, that we dim over time. And every one of us is on a journey to recovering ourselves. And not everybody has addiction. And not everyone's addiction is necessarily what society deems an undesirable addiction. Some people have work addictions. Some people have achievement addictions. There are all different kinds of ways that we fill the unfillable hole. And for me, it was pacifiers like alcohol and eating poorly and things like that. And I had a lot of misalignment in my life. So when I left the airport, I flew home, and a friend of mine, Christine, who I had treated very, very much like I treated the woman at the airport in the past. She would reach out to try to help me, and I'd be like, yeah, and
get away,
get out of here. She reached out to me about a 6-week thing called the Whole Life Challenge, which was an online. Actually, it's a community, but it's structured in a gameplay sort of way. And it was focused on 7 daily habits, basics, nutrition, hydration, exercise, well-being, reflection. I don't remember the 5 that I just said. Mobility, the sleep. That was the 7. And it was focused on these 7 daily habits of just foundational wellness. And she said, I know this isn't something that you normally would do, but I think at this moment, like this would be, and I was just, she said, I think this would be really good for you. And I was just at a place in my life where I was like, I wasn't strong enough to hold up the ego, I wasn't strong enough to say, no, I don't want this. I was just like, no, I'll do it. It's fine. And I remember being like $49, and I would freely spend $50 to $70 at the bar after a shift at the restaurant every night. Like that was fine. Like, yeah, sure, $40 bar tab every night, $30 tip, great. But it was hard for me to spend that $49 because when you come up against the barrier of the known self, like you'll say it's about money, but it's not. It's about you. And that the barrier of the known self is there. And I went through that, and it was the first step to really getting things back on track, starting with the fundamentals, the basics. Like before all of the big stuff happened, before the big shift in career, before the big shift in my physical, sure, I started exercising, but I wasn't a marathon runner. I actually did run my first marathon at the end of that year. But just the basics, just basic wellness. And that was my first step in recovery. And like I said, I didn't stop drinking for 2 years, but just to be able to start recovering those pieces. I didn't drink water. Water was not something that was part of Andee Scarantino's day. Like it was tab soda, so it was just those basic pieces. And that was where it really started there.
That's very interesting. One of the things that I loved about your story, Andee, I wrote a book several years ago. It was a young woman who was going through addiction. And one of the things she said as she came out was, I never recognized how much I disrespected myself. And that's why I kept falling back. Is that what you saw as you were going through this upheaval?
1,000%. So this is really interesting, and I'll piggyback off of that with a story. So you know, I quit smoking at that right at a month after the airport. So the airport was January 2018. The following month, at the end of February, February 28th, I quit smoking. 2018, I'd smoked for 18 years, and what I noticed was that smoking for me was reactive behavior, that something happens to you, you know, and you want to react. You want to have a reactive behavior. You want to eat it away, drink it away, fuck it away, gamble it away. Like, you want to do these things because you get disrespected. So you want to disrespect yourself right back. Like, that's what you want to do. Now, I haven't smoked a cigarette in over 4 years, but I still spend time in these non-smoking communities just to, you know, just support and things like that. And a lot of people will say things like, I haven't had a cigarette in 3 months, but you know, then my partner left me and so I just needed something. And it's like, there it is. There's the reactive behavior. You feel disrespected, and the first thing you want to do is disrespect yourself. And what did I do in my life? Like, had a bad night at the restaurant. Somebody, you know, people are notoriously abusive to restaurant employees. So what happens? I want to go and get drunk. I want to go and disrespect myself because that's how I was treated. And somehow at some point in my life, I don't know if it was childhood, I don't know if it was shit with my father, I don't know if it was shit with early jobs, I don't know, you know, I don't know what it was. But somehow I developed a program that when I felt disrespect, I would disrespect myself, that I was always looking for a savior. And I didn't realize that I had to be the one that was going to pull myself out of the crap. Like, that was, I had to do it. It was me. And yeah, so I very much relate to that, that ending the disrespect, ending the, just all of that, because it doesn't matter. Like I said, there are no villains in my story other than me, because I allowed and tolerated every single thing that, and there's so much story, you know, to all of it. So much story, right? Like, story to the relationship, story to the leading up to the airport, story. You could put story on top of story on top of story. I inserted myself into that. And instead of being really the hero in my own story, which is what I wanted to be, which is what I deserve to be.
Wow, that's intense. Recovery is interesting because as I'm reading your book, your chapter in the book, you talk about, you made some amazing strides. You're now running marathons, you're doing 10Ks, and not a lot of people can do that. But recovery is not a linear path. There's like 2 steps forward and maybe 3 steps backwards that occurs, and it seems to be on an ongoing basis. So you had a moment. You wrote about, you had run a sub 9-minute 10K race, which is impressive as hell. Not many people could do that. And then there was a step back. What occurred there? That should have been a high point.
Right. So it was. So first of all, Frank, I'm a little bit of I got to toot my own horn here. I run considerably faster than that now. Considerably. But I mean, this was 2 months after quitting smoking. So the idea that I could run faster than a 9-minute mile when I quit smoking 2 months prior was impressive as hell to me.
Yes.
You know, like, I mean, it was impressive as hell. So having that said, you know, just because I do love my running so much, and I love to have my humble brags. What happened that day was that, again, I had just quit smoking cigarettes. We were in the 9+1 program. So New York Roadrunners does a program where if you run 9 races and volunteer 1, you get guaranteed entry to the New York City Marathon. And I have since run the New York City Marathon. It's 26.2 miles. I've run quite a few full marathons since 2018. But this was like an earlier race. So in the 9+1 program, this was like a random 10K that I did with 2 friends. 10K is 6.2 miles, not a far distance. But we went one morning, and it was the fastest that I had run. Because when you realize you can breathe after not being able to breathe your whole life, like it's phenomenal. And I ran that 10K at the time, what was so fast for me. And I was wearing a GPS watch. And my mom noticed that I was doing this, and she was tracking me in the races. So she would always track me, and they have live results. And just as I was coming up on the finish of this 10K, my mom sent me a text saying, "You're almost there." And it was so, I'll get emotional. Like it was really touching, because I had always told a story. And again, it was just a story that my parents really didn't support me, that they weren't really there. And in reality, they were always there. Like they were there.
Right.
But I had told a story that they weren't. So it was so beautiful that not only was I running at this speed, and I was feeling so healthy. I had lost a good bit of weight by that point, but that my mom had supported me. And it was just, and we were gonna be, it was wonderful. Like here I am with these two friends, and we were all registered for actual full 26.2 marathons at the end of the year. All of us, even though we weren't going to be running New York that year, we were all registered for a marathon at the end of that year. And that was going to be exciting. I was really excited.
I bet.
Yeah. Like first, it was amazing. And we went to celebrate this 10K like this. And it's like just this random little 10K. Like, it's not even like, it's like a big to do, but it was a big deal for me that day. And we went, and we went to this place called Alfie's. I believe it was Alfie's. Yeah, we were definitely at Alfie's. And brunch, and then brunch turned into beers, and then beers turned into more beers. And we were talking about running the entire time, and we were talking about our upcoming marathons, but we were belligerent. We were drunk out of our minds by the time, because we felt, well, something good happened, so I got to go celebrate, do all this. And we left there, and we were professionals, so it was very hard to tell when we were overserved, because we all worked in the service industry. So we kept a good composure,
Right.
But we all left there, and I was walking back towards the train, and I was drunk out of my mind. And I was trying to cross the street, and a taxi was coming, and I tripped on the curb, and I went flying through the air. I mean, I have this medal around my neck still. I have a bib on still. I think I was still wearing the bib. And I am lying there bleeding on the sidewalk. And I'm like, you idiot. Like, what? Why are you doing this? Like, why was that necessary? Like, why was it necessary for you to do that? Like, to fuck it all up? Like, I'm part of my language, but like, just why was it necessary for you, after this beautiful moment that you had, to just disrespect yourself that way?
Mm-hmm.
And that was a really big moment for me, because I realized at that moment, like, oh, I really got to get this under control. Like, this is not great. Like, and again, like, I didn't drink every day. I didn't drink in the mornings. I was, after the airport incident, I really cut down to about 2 days a week, but still those 2 days were to excess. I mean, it wasn't a good relationship. I say, when you have a problem, it's only a problem if it's a problem for you. And for me, it was a problem. And just noticing and just seeing yourself, like, I had that scar on my knee for months from that, as a reminder.
Reminder what happened. So
Yeah.
from there, you took a step back. You went over to Qatar. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And opened up a restaurant, and then then we had the big turning point on a riverboat cruise.
Yeah. So here's what happened with that. So the following year, I was supposed to run the New York City Marathon we did this 9+1 program in 2018, and I was supposed to run the New York City Marathon in 2019, because your guaranteed entry is for the next year. And I was just so stuck in this job, like this job. I was like, why is it? Because I had lost 52 pounds.
Wow.
I had run a full distance 26.2 mile marathon, at the end of 2018. I had run countless races between that. I had changed so much about my life, but I was like, why can I not shift this career situation that I'm in? So an opportunity came up that they were going to be opening a restaurant in Qatar. And I thought, well, I got to do this. They were only taking six people in the whole company. And I'm like, well, I've worked for this company since 2008. Like, if this is an opportunity, like, I'm going to put my name in the ring. And got in an interview with the gentleman that was hiring for the position, and we hit it off well. And I guess I sold myself well, and I got chosen to be on the opening team, and I got to go over to the Middle East and open this restaurant. And I was always very insecure about my career choices. That was one of those limiting beliefs that I had, you know, and it kind of ties into the ideas that I formed, those old programs about myself right from childhood, you know, that I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough, like all of those that function in the background, that there's lack in the world, that security is something that's there's scarcity, there's a lack of security, like all of these old things that tie back to small t traumas, but, you know, things that I had that I wasn't aware at the time were functioning. And I thought, oh my, you know, I very much determined, I never wanted a conventional job, and I never wanted to work in corporate America, but I was really unhappy doing what I was doing. And I thought, this is an opportunity. Like, this is a really beautiful opportunity, and I want to go over there and do that. And when I got there, and I forfeited my guaranteed entry that I worked the whole previous year to get, so that to the New York City Marathon, so that I could have this opportunity. And people were like, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity. You know, this is wonderful. You can run the New York City Marathon any year. Well, womp womp, we had COVID. I didn't run it until 2021, but that's, you know, that's spoiler.
Right.
But I decided to do this. And when I did that, I realized once again, I was still making decisions out of alignment. Like, I saw myself as a thought leader, as an innovator. I saw myself as somebody, you know, I studied sociology, so I was interested in seeing the culture and the people and all of that stuff. But all I was just a restaurant worker put in another restaurant, in another place.
Right.
Like, and I saw that when I got there, and I was like, this isn't what I want out of life. Like, this isn't what I want to be doing. Like, I'm not, and there's nothing wrong with that work. It's just, it was misaligned for me. It was rote, it's repetitive. And even though it required a little bit more innovation, it still was just this basic job, just put in another place. And we had one day off where the owner of all of the restaurants were franchised outside of the country. So the franchise owner organized this beautiful day for us. And we rode camels in the desert, and at night we went on a riverboat. And, you know, Doha's really beautiful in at night, and it's gorgeous. And the man who interviewed me for that position, we had really kind of gotten to know each other throughout the day, and he had gotten to know a lot about me and my interests and who I was, you know, just different things about me, educations, you know, things that and we were sitting on this, and he's a vice president with the company now. And we were sitting on this riverboat together, and he's like, what are you doing? It's like, what are you doing? And I was like, yeah, I just can't get out of my own way. Like, I can't. And I know a lot of people in personal development don't like that phrase, but that was so true for me. I was like, I just cannot get out of my own way. He's like, you know, at the time, I'm now 34. And he's like, you want to be doing this? Like, you want to be doing what we called breakage, which is, you know, carrying beer and liquor out at the end of every shift. Do you want to be standing on your feet? Do you want to be doing this? I'm like, why don't you go and do something? And I didn't know how to budge. I didn't know how to budge until, you know, really the following year, which I talk about a little bit in the story. But he's like, do you want to be doing these things? And I'm like, I don't want to be doing these things. I don't know what to do. So he gave me 3 books. Ishmael, A Brief History of Time, and The Holographic Universe. He told me to read these 3 books. He told me, go home. He's like, I hope you stop working for our company. Like, and it was it was the most powerful thing anyone ever said to me. And he was telling me about, you know, his son was terminally ill, and he had worked for the company, and he'd quit because he wanted to show his son, who was just a baby, the world before he died. And they went and traveled the whole world. And his son did pass away while they were, with several stamps on his passport, you know, while they were traveling the world. And it was because he did that and made that aligned, heartfelt decision that he was in the role that he was in with the international part of the corporation that we worked for. And it was because he followed, he made that aligned decision. He did what was best for him and his heart, for his son, for his family. And it communicated to me that like the logical path might not always be the path, that following your higher self really is the way. And I left when our restaurant shut down for COVID. I never went back. Like that was the end of it. So yeah, that was.
Well, there was the watershed moment as you moved on.
Mm.
Now you came back. You mentioned Josh quite a bit. Now Josh was one of your running partners, and then he
Yes.
ran with you in the New York City Marathon.
He did, yeah. He ran with me. We actually have run 3 world major marathons back side by side. We ran Chicago together twice and New York once. And yeah, he's a really good friend. He had actually did the 9+1 program with me. So that was really nice.
Right, so it's having that somebody, that anchor, which I hear from so many people that a go-to. I need an anchor. I got to get away from the environment. When I did this book on this addict, I heard this one addict speaking, and he was saying that whenever you try to move forward, he used misery like a person. Misery is going to reach up and grab you, try to pull you back in. It's almost like in Godfather 3. Every time I think I'm out, they pull me back in.
Mm,
Is that a battle you still face?
no.
Good for
Yeah,
you.
it's interesting because the word addict pretty much has the weight of the word God in society, but I don't even really think of it anymore. Like I'm a brilliant human being, and I think that getting away from that and just allowing myself to neurologically wire myself into this inadequacy and making misaligned choices was something that caused triggers for me to do certain behaviors. And I'll tell you what, and this isn't in the story, but because I had quit smoking, when I had stopped drinking, I I had no problem just putting down alcohol. And it wasn't until, and I talk about my friend Andee in the story a lot, about the person that gifted me the book Loyalty to Your Soul. It wasn't until I had read that book. I stopped drinking the Christmas Day 2019 was the last time I ever drank alcohol. And it wasn't until February that I wanted to drink, that I really wanted to drink. Like I'd stopped drinking Christmas Day, have a care in the world to touch alcohol until February. And in February, I had my first real trigger to drink alcohol. And it was because I was standing outside of my shitty misaligned job that I couldn't stand. And I was thinking about the people that I would have to work with that day. And they were real, micromanagerial kind of, not so kind people. And I thought, I just want to leave this. I just want to leave and just get hammered. And I thought of that book, and and it talked about how unresolved issues or anything that disturbs your peace, and the challenge of spiritual bypass, or that negative emotions are deemed not spiritual and should be avoided. And I realized in that moment what a trigger was. And I was like, I don't really want to get drunk. I don't want to work with this person. And I don't have the fucking self-esteem to go do something else. So that's why I want to do this, because I don't have the self-esteem. And I'm not willing to make any decisions that are aligned to get myself out of this. That was really one of the first and last triggers that I've ever really had, because it's not about the reactive behavior. It's about you being misaligned with you. Mm-hmm. And so it doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter what your behavior is that you do, whether it's drinking or drug addiction or whatever. Like the way that we think about addiction in society is really kind of messed up, because we put, like everything in Western society, a focus on the symptom and not the problem. And the problem is you are so misaligned. And if you're misaligned, you're going to feel that way. And I don't live a misaligned life anymore. So even when things are hard, or even when I'm sad, or even when I'm feeling a negative emotion, it's okay. Like, because I'm moving in a direction that I want to be moving in, rather than just doing a bunch of shoulds and kind of feeling and telling a disempowering story about myself, which I So yeah, no, there isn't really a fight. It's not it's not, it's not even really something that crosses my mind really until but I think that, putting it in the context of, um, I think using words addiction and talking about substance abuse is important because that's where everybody starts. They
Right.
start with the symptoms. So like when I write, like when I'm gonna, tell a story like I do in the fourfold formula, I'm gonna start where people are at when I tell a story like that, because that's really where everybody starts. That is where I started.
Is exactly right. It's so interesting because what you said earlier, most people will say sobriety has to occur before recovery.
Mm.
You put that on its head and said, no, recovery starts first, and I care about my recovery. I don't necessarily care about, not necessarily don't care about, I care less about sobriety. Is that correct?
Correct. I care less about it. And because it wasn't the catalyst for the recovery. For a lot of people, sobriety is the catalyst because they're not necessarily thinking clearly, and you do have to put it down. Like you got to put it down. And some people can work in kind of harm reductionist ways where they do cut down, they do it once or twice. I definitely cut down severely when I before I gave it up altogether. And because you got to see through the veil, like you got to be, and you're living when you're binge drinking many nights a week, you're in a haze, so a lot of people do need to have that moment where they put it down completely before they can start recovering, before they can have that clarity. I just had the fortunate experience of having the airport, of having that rock bottom. And a rock bottom, one of my first mentors in sobriety, said that rock bottom is really just being the furthest away from your fullest potential. And it the needle keeps moving. So what is a rock bottom? It's whatever you put up with. Like it's just going to keep moving. It's going to just, the universe is just keep dropping branches until it drops the tree. So is it homelessness? Is it losing your job? For me, it wasn't. For me, it was just being left at the airport. That was the rock bottom. That was enough. And, I finally gave up drinking Christmas 2019 because of, noticing another holiday,
Yes.
like where we started
Yes. Yes.
with family, and that was another really low moment for me. But it's like when is enough? And but sobriety for me did not precede recovery. Recovery preceded sobriety.
That's very interesting. So, Andee, how do people get a hold of you?
Oh my, well, you can go to my website, getthefuckoff.com. You can listen to episodes of my podcast, the Get the Fuck Off podcast, there, Apple, Spotify, and on Amazon Music or Audible. You can email me, Andee at getthefuckoff.com. I'm on Instagram at Andee Scarantino, Andee's with two E's. Facebook, I'm Andrea Scarantino, LinkedIn, the same. And if you just Google me, Andee Scarantino, you'd be able to find all of that stuff. But
There's a
but
ton of stuff on there.
getthefuckoff.com. Yeah, that is my website, and that is where you can find me. And I do a lot of content on personal development, on getting back to yourself, and also about some stuff to deal with the more practical, the habit formation, breaking bad habits, getting away from some of this stuff. So there's something there for
For
everybody.
just about everybody.
Yeah.
Well, folks, we are just about out of time. I want to thank Andee again for sharing this story. This is intense, this transformation. And it all began alone on an airport bench. That's such an intriguing topic for this chapter she wrote. Get the book, Fourfold Formula for All Things Wellness. It has just come out. Get the book. There are 43 different authors in here, including me and Andee. So you got two New Yorkers, two Italians from New York. You can't get any better than that.
Yeah,
That's right.
definitely not.
Yes. As I said, we're just about out of time. I want to thank Andee one more time for sharing this story. And when life puts up these insurmountable obstacles, or what seems to be insurmountable, just do three things like she did. You got to look up, you got to get up, and you can never, ever give up. Pick up the pieces, start moving forward, and better times and better people like Andee will come into your life. Now, you can see this on ROKU TV or on my YouTube channel, which is Frank Zaccari. And if you go to YouTube, please subscribe. Let me leave you with this, as I do every single week. None of us are in this alone. And the secret to walking on water is to know where the rocks are. And today, Andee showed us where many, many of those rocks are. Join us again next week we'll get into another energy healing and alternative wellness. Andee, thank you again.
Thank you so much, Frank.